So I hope you understand what I'm explaining. That is example of finches in Galapagos Island. There are many different Galapagos Island, and according to the food they get, food these birds get, the big size and big shape has been changed. So genetic variations, this genetic variation help to rise within the population. The fittest will be selective at the selective advantage. The birds which cannot eat the grain, they will die. For this purpose, the size of the beak should be smaller. The birds which cannot eat the fruit with small size beak, this type of birds will be not selected by the nature, more likely to produce offsprings than the rest. And the birds which has been adapted to this type of food or to this type of environment, they will produce the offspring. Offspring means the new individuals will enjoy greater survival, and reproductivity of new species will eventually evolve. Natural selection is a process by which better adapted organisms grow and produce more number of offsprings in the population. We are going to study all these points with the example in the next slide. So we are going to study about the moth, that is Biston betularia. So we will only see these points, and later on you will be able to understand, or you will be able to get your concept clear. It brings about evolutionary changes by favoring differential reproduction of genes, leading to changes in gene frequency of next generation. Selection against harmful mutation leads to mutation balance in which allele frequency of harmful recessive remain constant generation after generation. Selection against harmful mutations leads to a mutation balance in which allele frequency of harmful recessives remain constant generation after generation. Natural selection encourages those genes or traits that assure highest degree of adaptive efficiency between population and its environment. So, what is the benefit of natural selection? Natural selection encourages those genes or traits which show adaptive efficiency. What is the meaning of adaptation or adaptive? What is adaptation? Girls, answer my question. What do you know about adaptation?
Ma'am, it is a process of changing from a state.
Process of changing
To suit a new situation or
new environmental condition. Okay.
Environment or situation. Yes.
Environmental situation or environmental condition. From our previous classes, we are studying about adaptation. For example, duck has to be adapt to the aquatic condition. Camel has to be adapt to the desert condition. Cactus plant has to adapt for desert condition. So like this, different characters are there which help to survive the organism in the difficult situation or difficult type of environmental condition. So this is adaptation. Now see here, industrial melanism. What is melanin? Do you know melanin? Can you tell me about melanin? What is melanin, keratin? Have you heard about this? Melanin It is a type of pigment. You know, color, our skin color depends upon the amount of melanin. More melanin pigment, more darker will be the color. Less melanin pigment, less darker will be the color. So melanin, it is a type of protein. So if there is deficiency of melanin, the person suffers from albinism. Albinos, you know, albinos, they are white, pigmentation is lost, their color of eye, color of skin, color of eyelashes, color of hair becomes white. Why? Because melanin pigment is not synthesized. One of the best example for natural selection in Great Britain before industrialization, that is in 1845. Gray white winged moth, that is Biston betularia. There are two types of moths. In this picture, you can see these moths. Two types of moths are seen. One is gray in color or white in color. Another one is black in color. So this gray moth, it is named as Biston betularia, while black moth is, the scientific name of this black moth is Biston carbonaria. So in 1845, these gray moths were dominant, means they were more in number as compared to black in number. Why? The reason behind this is in 1845, during this time, pollution was very less in amount. There was no pollution. So these moths which were present on trees, they were not identified by their predators. Their predators. What is the meaning of predator? Prey and predator. Can you tell me what is prey and predator? Prey म्हणजे काय आणि predator म्हणजे काय? प्रे किसको बोलते हैं और प्रीडेटर किसको बोलते हैं, पता है क्या?
Ma'am, the animal which kills another animal for his survival or for eating.
It is called prey. Yes, for example,
no, it is
rat
called
is
a
prey. Predator. Rat
Predator.
is prey and cat is predator. Okay, means those who eat. For example, birds eat this moth. Bird is the predator, and for him this moth is the prey. P-R-E-Y, prey. Okay. So do you got the difference? Bird is the predator. For him, this moth, he want to eat this moth. So this moth will be prey for that bird. That is predator. So during this time, as pollution was very less in amount, the branches of trees were clear. So if these moths were there, they were not identified by the birds or by lizards, predators. Okay, so they were not eaten. But if on the white background, if this black moth is there, they will easily identify this moth and they will eat. So more amount of white moths were there when there was less pollution. But as the years passes, pollution increases and the soot means the smoke from the industries settles on the buildings, branches of the trees. During that time, these black moths were not identified by the predators. Why? Because on black background, these black moths were not identified. समझ में आ रहा है क्या मैं जो बता रही हूँ? हाँ मैम. Okay. So on black background, these black moths were not identified by the predators, while on the black background, these white moths were easily identified by the predators. So the amount decreases. White moths were decreased. Why? Because they were easily identified and they were eaten by the predators. So this number decreased. The number of white moths decreased and number of white moths increased. So this is termed as industrial melanism. And where this occurred in Great Britain before industrialization, white moths were more in number, more dominant as compared to black moth. But as the year passes, black moths were adapted than that of the white moths. So according to the environmental changes, the number increases or decreases, and it depends upon the predators. The moths are nocturnal. What is the meaning of nocturnal? Nocturnal. What is diurnal? What is nocturnal? Do you know these terms? Girls, please answer my questions. Means which are active during night time. Diurnal means which are active during daytime. Okay. The moths are nocturnal and during daytime they rest on tree trunk. Before industrial revolution, white-winged moth can camouflage, hide in the background. Means background and their color appeared same. So this term is called as camouflage. Well, with lichen converted trees that help them to escape from the predatory birds. So when pollution was not there, trees were covered by lichens. What is lichen? Can you tell me the term lichen, or what is this lichen? You had studied this in class 11th and in also your previous classes like 9th, 10th also you had heard this term lichen, or you can call it lichen. So these are the organisms which show symbiotic association between algae and fungi. येते लक्षात तुमच्या लायकेन्स म्हणजे काय असतात? जेव्हा मसाल्यामध्ये आपण दगडफूल वापरतो. This is also a type of lichen. So these trees were covered by lichen and predators cannot identify. As the background is white, white moths were not recognized by these birds. But the black-winged moth resting on lichen-covered tree trunk were easy victims for the predatory birds, so their number was reduced. So the number of white moths was increased and number of black moths was reduced before industrial revolution. See, here it is shown in this picture. As the background is black here, after increased pollution, soot is deposited on tree trunk. Lichens are also not seen. So the background is black. During this time, predators easily recognize these white moths and black were not identified. So the number of black was increased, white was reduced. But before pollution, here white moths were not identified in this white background, while black moths were identified. So the number of black moths was reduced and white moths was increased. During Industrial Revolution, large industries came up in Great Britain. Industries released black sooty smoke that covered and killed the lichens growing on the tree and turned tree black due to pollution. As I had already explained you all these points. This change became an advantage to black-winged moth that camouflaged well with black tree trunks. Chameleon is also one of the example for camouflage. That is, this garden lizard changes its color according to the environment. For example, if it is on grass, it will change its color into green so that its predator will not identify and will not kill it. So this is called as camouflage. So their number increased while the white-winged moth become victims to the predator birds, due to which their number reduced. Thus, natural selection has resulted in the establishment of phenotypic traits in changing the environmental conditions. So this last point, natural selection has resulted in the establishment of a phenotypic trait. Phenotypic trait has been changed according to the environmental conditions. In generation 0, see, there is more amount of white moths when there was no population, 10% dark colored phenotype, while 80% dark colored phenotype is seen after several generations. Here also another picture is given. See, here lichens are shown in this diagram. Before pollution, as lichens are present, these white moths were not identified and blacks were identified. After pollution has been increased, here black were not identified and white were identified by these predators. Isolation is not there in your syllabus. So we are going to study, it is there. Isolation is the separation of population of a particular species into smaller units which prevents interbreeding between them. As barrier which prevents gene flow or exchange of genes between isolated population is called isolating mechanism. So isolation is the separation of population. In our previous lecture, we had studied some points regarding this population separation. Do you remember? We had studied about barriers like natural disasters like earthquake, flood, or landslide, due to which population gets separated from each other. It is called as isolating mechanism. Due to isolating mechanism, what happens? Divergence and speciation occurs. Two types. There are actually three types. Two types of isolating mechanism, like geographical isolation and reproductive isolation. Speciation is also means formation of new species. It is called as speciation. A population forms a new species after being geographically isolated. So here is the barrier, geographical barrier. It may be river, it may be eruption of volcano, it may be formation of mountain or any other geographical barrier. So due to this geographical barrier, what happens? Population gets separated from each other. It is called allopatric speciation. While in sympatric speciation, sim means same, allo means other. You have to remember these terms. Allo means other. So two groups are formed due to this physical barrier. Sim means on the same place. Subset, small group of population forms new species without geographic separation. So you can see this with the help of this diagram. Physical or allopatric isolation, it occurs when an original population is divided into two or more groups by geographical barriers. Which are these geographical barriers? River, ocean, mountain, forest, islands, glaciers, etc. So these are the geographical barriers due to which new population is formed. Why new population is formed? Because separation of population occurs and species get separated from each other. So if this organism has to adjust to the new environmental condition, it leads to the formation of new species. So this is called as physical or allopatric isolation. Allo means other. So these are the barriers which we had studied. Which are these barriers? River, it might be ocean, it might be mountain, forest, island, glaciers, etc. It is very easy to understand with the help of this picture. See here, river is flowing, so the complete population gets separated from each other. These organisms cannot cross this river, so they remain separated from each other. So here also Galapagos Islands, this is the mainland. Some of the birds have been migrated towards another species, another place. So many islands are here. On each island, different species has been formed. Why different species have been formed? Because the environmental condition on each island is different. So for this purpose, new species has been formed. Allopatric speciation is also called geographic isolation. Natural selection works on these separated groups independently. See here, original beetle population, due to formation of river, population gets separated from each other. After many generations, variations or differences takes place in both of the population, and they cannot interbreed among themselves. These barriers prevent interbreeding. They cannot mate, so it is interbreeding. The separated groups are exposed to different conditions of environmental factors. They acquired new traits by mutation. By different changes in the genes, new characters appears in them. So develop distinct gene pool and they do not interbreed and new species is formed. So previously I had given about example of this Darwin's finches. See the shape of the beak of each finch. See here, beak is smaller as compared to the beak of another finch. Shape is also different. So why this has been occurred? Why the shape and size of these finches has been occurred? According to the food they get. Vegetarian tree finches, see the big, medium insectivorous tree finches, small insectivorous means insect eating finches, large insect eating finches, woodpecker, mangrove finch. Mangrove, it is a type of plant. So small ground finch, medium ground finch, large ground finch. See the shape of each finches. Insect eating, cactus eating, seed eating. So these are the different types of finches which has been found in the different islands, Galapagos Island. So this was studied by Darwin. See the shape. Reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolations occur due to change in genetic material, gene pool, structure of genital organs. It prevents interbreeding between population. So this is called as reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation occurs due to change in genetic material, gene pool, and also structure of genital organs. Pre-zygotic barriers means before the formation of zygote, some barriers occurs here. It does not allow, sperm and egg does not fuse. So this is called as pre-zygotic barrier. And after the fusion of egg and sperm, again there are post-zygotic barriers so that reproduction will not occur. So this is called as pre and post-zygotic barriers. This is under reproductive isolation. See here, in pre-zygotic isolation, prevention of mating. Why there is no mating? Because of behavioral isolation, means different changes occurs in the behavior of male and female individuals. Temporal isolation and ecological or habitat isolation. Due to different place, they cannot mate with each other. Then prevention of fertilization, mechanical isolation or gametic isolation. So there may be change in the genital organ